For more on the developing situation, we're joined by Yahoo Finance Washington correspondent Ben Werschel. Also with us, Kathryn Rooney Vera, the chief market strategist for StoneX, which is a financial services firm that helps companies and investors access global markets, trade, manage risk, and more. Thank you both for being here. Ben, I want to get started with you. And a little context here I think is necessary because although the president has talked about Greenland for a while, he brought it up in his first term as well. For people who are watching, like, why Greenland? Why the focus, and one might even say fixation on Greenland right now?
Right. What I think is making this issue especially confusing is that you get two different answers to that question just from Trump himself. You mentioned the national security parts at the top. This is a combination of oil, rare earth minerals, missile defense, all these issues that Trump talks about most commonly as his reason for wanting Greenland right now to take it into U.S. control from Denmark. Frankly, the facts, there's a lot of holes in that, based on the fact that U.S. oil companies, rare earth companies, and the U.S. government itself has a lot of access to Greenland already, and that's not expected to change. So that's the national security case that Trump is making. He made it again last night in a series of overnight posts. But the other point here, I think, is that he's also saying clearly that this is partly kind of personal to him. He sent a message to Norway's leader over the weekend that partly here is that he feels he's emboldened to take Greenland because he was denied a Nobel Peace Prize. He said, as he put it, he doesn't have to think purely of peace anymore. Not only did he send that message to Norway, he then his team forwarded it on to a bunch of other European leaders. So there's clearly kind of a personal element here, a fixation on getting this, as you put it, to sort of because of this Nobel issue, but also kind of a larger priority. As you mentioned, he's been talking about this since the beginning of his first term.
And so what are the, for people who weren't following all the blow-by-blows over the weekend, what levers is he now threatening to pull if he doesn't get the buy-in of the rest of Europe on this?
Yeah, so there's these tariffs are his main lever he's trying to pull. It's 10% tariffs starting next month, 25% going forward. There's a lot of questions about whether this is a threat to kind of increase his security, U.S. security guarantees in Greenland or more. He's also talking about tariffs kind of more broadly. He's threatening new tariffs on France. That's over a sort of separate issue of a peace institute he's trying to get started around the issue of Gaza. So it's all kind of tariffs. It comes back for Trump for tariffs. Tariffs are the way he thinks he can kind of get everything he wants. This is a trend we've seen in the entire first year of Trump's term. It also comes, I would note, as the Supreme Court is sort of set to have a decision on the legality of a lot of Trump's tariffs, potentially today, but at least in the next few months.
And Kathryn, all of this is happening amidst the backdrop of the World Economic Forum in Davos, where a lot of these world leaders, including President Trump tomorrow himself, are going to be speaking. And President Macron of France just spoke and kind of raised the possibility of countermeasures from Europe, but kind of tried to play it down. What do you make of the reaction we're seeing in the markets and how seriously you think, or not, investors are taking all of this?
I think the market is reacting to the downside probably because of the escalation of tariffs more than the threat to Greenland. I'll add to Ben's point. I think the U.S. already operates key radar and space infrastructure in Greenland, so we have a presence there. But my understanding is that Greenland is for sure a security issue. You know, it centers on Arctic defense, missile warnings, and critical minerals. And as ice melts, my understanding is that Arctic shipping lanes expand.
Well, so Kathryn, if I may interrupt you for a minute, is the rationale sort of irrelevant? Isn't it more relevant that the president is trying to take over something that belongs to a NATO member and is threatening these tariffs? I mean, is like the rationale, say what you will about it, but
I think it is relevant because this is not like an invasion. So this is not something that's going to, send the markets reeling because Trump invades Greenland. I think what's happening here is he's trying to build the NATO presence and buy Greenland. So that my answer to you is that I don't think this is going to send the markets reeling. His argument is that Russia has militarized the region. China says they kind of own the Arctic Circle now, and Denmark can't defend Greenland, which is in our own backyard. I think, Julie, what's happening here is that this is part of Monroe Doctrine 2.0. We saw it in Venezuela. You can't compare the two because Venezuela is a different scenario, but this is part of, this is our neighborhood. We're going to defend it. I don't think the markets are going to care that much. I think today the markets are down. Things are going to resolve. You can see the Trump playbook and things certainly, I think, in my view, resolve. So I care very little about this, honestly, Julie. I think that what we should be focused on is rates. I think rates set the tape. I think if we get fiscal profligacy continuing to the upside, if we get a resurgence of inflation, all bets are off. I think the market drops. That's not my base case, but I'm way more concerned about that than I am about Greenland or 10% tariffs, because we've seen this playbook before. We saw it last year. Markets don't care. Inflation was minimally affected. Economic growth is above potential. I think the biggest risk from my perspective, Julie, going into this year is an overheating of the U.S. economy, a resurrection of inflation, because the economy is growing so well. So yeah, Greenland is not the main focus for me or for my investors.
When you talk about fiscal, though, I mean, if we bought Greenland, presumably it wouldn't be cheap. I mean, that would be spending, right? I mean, that would be a big spend.
Yes. Yeah, I don't think it'll blow away the deficit. I think we're already doing that. I mean, we have 6.5% fiscal deficit, and the main drains on the fiscal accounts are not the purchase of Greenland. They're the ever-growing cost of entitlement programs. That's the main drains on our fiscal account. And now it's interest payments, right? So interest payments now exceed, and by a large amount, defense spending. So it's interest payments, Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. I don't think that changes. I think fiscal deficits stay markedly above pre-COVID levels. And I think that just leads to a new normal of inflation. We're going to get inflation of 2.5% to 3%, and that's the new norm. I think the Fed can't cut to pre-COVID levels ever again. So we're probably seeing a Fed that drops rates max 2 times this year at 25 basis points each, unless we get a surge on unemployment. And that would have to, in my view, break 5% for the Fed to move more than 2 times.
Ben, you mentioned that it's possible that we could get a Supreme Court ruling on the tariffs today. We know they're in session, and they've been sort of coming out with rolling rulings. Is what the president is threatening over Greenland, does that influence the case? I mean, I know the arguments have already closed, et cetera, but because it is a different kind of threat over a different issue, does that have any effect or bearing on the ruling?
I mean, it doesn't necessarily have an effect on this decision. As you mentioned, the arguments are already done, and the justices may be considering that. They have not outlined exactly how he's going to follow through on these threats. It would presumably be these IEEPA tariffs. This is what the Supreme Court is deciding is legal one way or the other. These blanket tariffs that Trump is imposing, this is how he's imposed his other tariffs. The Trump administration has said that they're going to follow up these tariffs, even if they have a negative ruling, with other authorities. Section 301 is a major one. A lever they could pull to kind of essentially replace these International Emergency Economic Powers Act base tariffs with a different authority going forward. So I don't know that it affects the decision. It definitely affects kind of how easily or how quickly Trump can add or subtract tariffs in the days ahead to follow up on this threat, as well as keep his other threats going forward.
And Kathryn, it feels like most of what you're discussing from a sort of fiscal and monetary policy backdrop, for that matter, sort of leaves aside any tariff back and forth, right, and sort of the short-term stuff that's been going on. So given the backdrop that you're talking about, what are the implications for equities, for rates, for other assets?
Yeah, I think that if inflation expectations remain stable and anchored and the 10-year doesn't fly, I'm talking, above 4.5%, I think S&P does well this year. Earnings are pretty good. Tariff revenues are at $300 billion, so that's not talked about quite a bit, but we have had an influx of cash into the coffers, and that is relevant without a market jump in inflation nor recession, which many of us, including myself, called, and we were wrong. So I think that markets do well this year, unless we get rates selling off, because of course discount rate sets the tape for everything. So it's less about earnings in my view, Julie, and much more about where rates go. If they stay low, if the Fed can cut, inflation doesn't resurge, then I think we can get another 10% upside in S&P, which is historically unusual to have so many years of double-digit growth.
It is. We'll see if it happens. Kathryn, thank you so much. Good to see you. Ben, thank you. Appreciate it.